A lot of families see parochial schools as a viable alternative, even many non-Catholic families. And indeed, student enrollments are up in some dioceses. But while this could be a golden age of Catholic education, there are many problems keeping that vision from being realized. Rebekah Bydlak represents the American Federation for Children, an organization that's focused on increasing educational opportunities. Rebekah, perhaps you could describe some of the challenges which Catholic schools are facing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. This is such an important issue for people all across the country. And for those of your listeners who are not familiar, which I imagine may not be very many, Catholic schools are such a critical part of this story, for parents who want to direct the education of their children, which is not only a fundamental right as Americans, it's fundamental to those of us who are Catholic, to our identity. The Catechism says that parents have the right to choose a school for them that corresponds to their own convictions, that the right is fundamental, and that public authorities have a duty of guaranteeing this parental right and of ensuring concrete conditions for its exercise. So Catholic education, the story of Catholic education in many ways is the story of America. These schools have been there for communities that needed them throughout history. We have some of the most prominent leaders in our country have attended Catholic schools, and my organization focuses on school choice. We've seen this massive amount of advancement in that area, especially over the past couple of years. More and more children are able to have their parents choose a school that meets their needs and values regardless of income. And for many, many people in many communities, those schools are Catholic schools. The problem is for states especially that don't have school choice or don't have strong school choice, finances are a major barrier. So if you talk to anyone who's involved in Catholic education, this is not going to be a surprise, but it's a mission of the church. This is very much something that everyone is dedicated to making work no matter what. And what that often translates into is massive amounts of private philanthropy, heroic efforts from staff, from clergy, from parishioners to donate and to keep schools open. But unfortunately, as enrollment declines in many states, or if things just change, there's unforeseen circumstances that come up, that's not tenable anymore. And schools in a lot of places across the country have been closing down, an average about 100 a year in some recent reports. And so things did turn around a little bit. For the second year in a row, so instead of enrollment falling, enrollment has been rising in America's Catholic schools. A big part of that is how well they did during the pandemic when the public education system just absolutely failed America's children. Catholic schools did more with less, and parents rewarded them by choosing them. And so we think that in order for that momentum in the right direction to continue, in order for every family to get the right to choose the education that their children need and deserve, Catholic schools are a critical part of that story, and there's a lot of evidence that school choice is a critical part of ensuring Catholic education can continue for the next generation.
I know that there have been many challenges around this question of whether public funding can go to faith-based schools. And in some cases, it's been successful. They've been able to tap into some public funds. But when a Catholic school or any kind of religious school is able to get school choice dollars, does that put them under any restrictions? Are they prohibited from using religious content in their teaching? Do they have to follow state-mandated curriculum guidelines?
That is a great question. I think the important distinction here is that school choice programs allow parents to have their taxpayer funds to direct to education. So it's not really about the schools even when you really think about it, and that's something that the Supreme Court has affirmed in several recent cases, most recently a case down of Maine related to religious education specifically being prevented as an option that parents can choose. And the court has ruled that parents have the right to choose among a range of options, including, for many parents, that might be religious instruction. And so when dollars go to the families can choose. And for some families, that will not be religious education. For some, that may be, a Montessori school or another public school or something, completely new. We are seeing a lot of new school models emerge. But the important part, and what's really important for participating education providers to be aware of and to recognize, is that it provides more freedom for families to choose, and it doesn't continue this system where government schools are really the only option for children. And so we should be on the lookout. That's a very important reason why education providers, why church leaders, why parents need to have a seat at the table in policy decisions, to make sure that the way that these programs operate and are set up don't represent something that would be problematic for the future. And so that's one thing that we work very hard with at American Federation for Children and a lot of other advocates is just making sure that leaders have a seat at the table as these decisions are being made, because it affects all of our future.
The charter school movement has gained a great deal of momentum. Is there any possibility for parochial schools to become charter schools and to receive what would otherwise be public education funding? Is that legally permissible?
That is something that is a discussion right now. So we are watching that closely. I know there's a lot of strong feelings across the side, all sides of that discussion. We are really encouraged to see the growth of public charter schools among just a vast array of different options. And so I think the fact that we're even having any of these conversations about what's next and what are these new frontiers that we might explore shows how far we've come. School choice used to be something that was incredibly limited only to the most specific, tiniest populations of students. And now in several states it's available to all students, and we're coming up with all of the new models that we see today that couldn't have even been imagined even a decade ago. And so that's certainly a discussion. We'll keep an eye on it. We're also excited to see the whole range of options that are popping up in states like Florida, where you might have a micro school next door to a thriving STEM Catholic school, next door to a really, really good charter school, and some public schools that have competed to become better as a result. And so we see so much promise with expanded, thriving school choice marketplace in some states that we think it should be expanded everywhere, because kids in every state deserve choice just as much as they do in states like Florida and Arizona.
It strikes me that there's a bit of reluctance to be too aggressive in marketing Catholic schools as educational alternatives. I think many bishops are a little gun-shy. Perhaps they don't want to catch flack for being too visible on the question. What would your advice be about this? Should the church be more aggressive in pushing their schools, offering them as an alternative?
Well, what we see a lot of is in robust school choice states, that is what's happening. So in states like Florida, the Catholic schools are absolutely defying national trends. You have year-over-year enrollment growth. There are new schools opening every single day. There's waiting lists, and they're really a meaningful, competitive alternative that are just thriving, not facing the sort of, existential challenges that schools are facing in a lot of other states. And so I can't speak for what works for every single person in every single area, every single church leader or school leader, but what we can say is what we have seen, which is that when choice flourishes, a rising tide lifts all boats, particularly for parents who care about Catholic school continuing as an option. School choice is a really important part of that conversation, because otherwise, unfortunately, it's at risk of being something that your parents or grandparents or great aunts might have gone to, but now the school is closed. That's too common of a story, and we're trying to keep every option available for as many families as might want it.
Well, tell us a little bit about the American Federation for Children. What do you guys do?
Yeah, so American Federation for Children is the nation's largest school choice organization. We believe that every family should have a right to choose the school that works for their children, regardless of income. And we do our work on 3 different playing fields, 3 different arenas. It's not a secret. It probably won't be a secret to your listeners that the education establishment and the teachers unions have very serious power, very serious money, and they devote a lot of resources into keeping people in line and making sure that they don't vote to expand choice. And so we do a lot of advocacy work to make sure that parents' voices are heard and make sure that the importance of actually listening to the vast majority of people, across ideologies, across demographics, who support school choice consistently in the polling over and over and over again. We also, through our affiliated electoral organizations, we work to elect school choice champions. It's important to change hearts and minds, and sometimes it's important to put different people in office who will listen and have a heart that's open to being changed. And so one area that's pretty exciting for us is in Texas. We now have a school choice majority for the first time in history, thanks in part to the work of AFC Victory Fund, which is our affiliated electoral organization. And of course, we do, as you referenced, as we're talking about now, a lot of work to just share the stories of school choice. I think this is something that most people may have probably heard the term and think, oh, that's something political. I don't necessarily know a lot about that. I hear that a lot just with people who don't get involved in public policy. But the reality is, these are personal stories. These are stories of people trying to survive, trying to get their kids to learn how to read, to learn how to do math, to have a better life. And we do a lot with fellowships and programs that identify people whose lives have been changed with school choice and take those stories to legislators or to the media, or making sure that they can get to a larger audience, because it's really challenging to take on the seemingly unlimited funds of the education establishment, but it's incredibly powerful when you can show what it means to a student's life. And so that's what we try to do.
How can people be in touch with you, maybe to share their stories or to find out more about your work?
Absolutely. That's a fantastic question. So you can go to federationforchildren.org. You can find out about a lot of our work on this page. I won't even try to describe all that's on there, but one thing that's really interesting, if people are interested in sharing their story, there's a tab at the top that says Voices for Choice. And you can click through that and share your story or read one of hundreds of stories across the country. They're very different. They're from different types of schools, different communities, different states. But the common theme is how school choice has changed lives. And so we host and share those stories, and would really encourage people to share their own stories, because I know that there are plenty of people out there who have incredible testimonies that we have not even heard yet.
Rebekah Bydlak, American Federation for Children, thanks very much for taking time to talk with us about this.
Thank you so much for having me.